I wanted to talk to you about gifts of the Holy Spirit. Um, a long time ago, before I had really delved into the Word myself to see the differences and to see what the truths were, and basically to debunk ideas or superstitions or theories about the Bible. Um, Someone would ask, if I was born again, and yeah, I'm born again, and I knew it. So, well, have you received the gifts of the Holy Spirit? And I didn't exactly know how to answer it because I didn't really know what context it was they're talking about, what they're getting at. I guess I did. I didn't really experience much. I didn't understand the difference between what I was experiencing or what this or what that was. So, I'd say, well, I prayed these prayers and, I hope it happened. And they're like, oh, well, you would know because if you had the gifts of if you received the Holy Spirit, then you'd be speaking in tongues. And that's not exactly true. Yeah, I mean, if you have the gift of tongues, then you'll probably start speaking it. However, not everybody gets the same gifts, and it doesn't always happen this way. It's definitely not. It's not. You're not carved into a mold. It's not like that. That's not how God does with things. Well, I'll talk. I'll read through a certain section here. It's Paul talks to the church of Corinth, 1 Corinthians 12, and I'll just I'll not I won't I'll read it with you and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Okay, we'll start right here at 4. See, this is 1 Corinthians 12. This is 4. There are diversities of gifts, but the same Holy Spirit. There are differences of ministries, but the same Lord. There are diversities of activities, but it is the same God who works all in all. But the manifestation of the Spirit is given to each one for the profit of all. To one is given the word of wisdom through the Spirit, to another the word of knowledge through the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healing by the same Spirit, to another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another discerning of spirits, and to another different kinds of tongues, to another interpretation of tongues. But one and the same Spirit works in these, distributing to each one individually as he wills. For as the body is one and has many members, but all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Christ. For by one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, and it goes on into describing the difference between being a Greek or a Jew or different types of people, saying like there are different cultures, but that doesn't make anyone better than anyone else. So it's an example that a lot of churches or a lot of people use in describing how you're supposed to get tongues is when the early church was at Pentecost. It was when the first church. They were meeting. I think if I had my history exactly correct, they were meeting after they had saw Jesus for the last time, and they were upstairs in this house and they were praying, and they prayed very deeply, and then right then Pentecost happened. The Holy Spirit came upon them. All right, it was around noonish or so. No, it was a little before noon because it says. What's the matter with these people? Were they drunk? Because they were flipping out, man. I mean, I've experienced this myself before, where the Holy Spirit comes on you and you just can't contain yourself. I mean, you just start flopping. I mean, it's not like you're like flipping out and running all over the place. I don't know exactly about that, but you can't contain your joy. You can't contain utterances that come out. And I've had this happen a couple of times. It doesn't happen all the time. So I understand what it was talking about because I experienced something very similar. I have never experienced speaking in tongues before. I've tried it. I've tried to push myself to do it, but I could feel that I was just trying to make something happen. And And so when they're talking about the Pentecost, that happened at that specific time, that specific event. It doesn't mean it's going to happen every time the Holy Spirit comes on people that they're just going to start speaking in tongues, because as it clearly says, not everybody gets it. And there's another, I had it marked over here, just be patient with me. There's another part that talks about weaknesses. I think I lost it. Hold on a second. Okay, yeah. I've also experienced this part myself. I was crying, not really crying, but I was just pushing. I was desperate to speak in tongues. I was desperate for it. And one thing I noticed that was more relieving for me and more helpful for me than anything, and I didn't know this until I actually read it, but I tried it like myself physically, and it worked, because before I read this, because it was actually relieved my soul. And I'll show you again. Romans 8:26. All right. Likewise, the Spirit also helps in our weaknesses, for we do not know what we should pray for as we ought, but the Spirit Himself makes intercession for us with groanings which cannot be uttered. And it's really literally like that, just making noises sometimes, like, oh God, I hope that didn't come across as me speaking God's name in vain. But you're searching for hope sometimes, or you really need to get out what's in your soul. You don't know what to say, and it's basically like you're like, Lord, please do something here. Do something inside of me. I don't really know how to describe it so well. I just know that sometimes you just need to groan a little, or sometimes just make noise or something. Not really to bug other people around or anything. Really, usually by yourself. Or if you are in the correct environment, then you do what you need to do. Number one thing, though, that Paul also tells us within the same 1 Corinthians, what's really important isn't necessarily the gifts of the Spirit, but more so what should be the motivation or the driver behind the gifts of the Spirit. Everyone's going to get some gifts, some type of gift. Number one thing that he says, everything is basically kind of pointless without to pursue love and desire spiritual gifts, but especially that you may prophesy. But the number one thing, number one above any of this, all right, is to pursue love. Love. Without love, as he says, what you're doing is clinging cymbals, making loud, obnoxious noise, and no one likes to hear that. Anything of the Spirit, well, in my experience, will either be convicting, or it'll bring a relax or an ease to your spirit. I think there were a couple of other things I wanted to point out as well, but I want to at this point I want to keep it kind of simple. If you do not speak in tongues, it's not the end of the world. I still don't speak in tongues. As far as society defines it, I probably do speak in something, because I know the Lord answers me all the time, like constantly. And also, just because you don't get your prayer answered right now does not mean it's not in the working. And it does not mean that your answer is going to be a yes. So, well, I appreciate your time. I hope I hope you get something out of this. God bless you.